Hi everyone, and welcome to my second video. This one is going to be about the books I read in July. The first book I read this month was The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which I don't have on me, but I have this helpful printout to help us. This doesn't really tell us that much. I really love this book. I found it because I was looking for books that were similar to my favourite series from last year, which was The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. And I found this book, and it shares this connection amongst the characters with the Raven Cycle, in that the 5 main characters for The Secret History are all really obsessed with each other, and they have these incredibly intense relationships that are kind of profound, and they see and idolize each other in really abstract ways. This book opens up with the murder of one of these 5 characters by the other 4. And the first half of the book is about learning the series of events that led up to the murder of this one character. And the second half of the book is the aftershocks, the repercussions of this murder, and the way that it impacts their lives and their mentality and everything that happens to them. And you sort of see these 5 characters just sort of delve into alcoholism and drug dependence and develop all these sort of reliances on substances. And it's really an enthralling book. I was actually reading this book when I was supposed to be doing my thesis, and it was due, and I really needed to be spending a lot of time on that, but I found myself to keep returning to this book, and I couldn't put it down, and I really recommend this book to read. It's incredible. It's about these 5 characters, like I said, and they're all Greek students at a college. And the thing about learning Greek at this college is that it's taken by one Greek professor, and he will only let them study with him if he's the teacher for all of their subjects. So these 5 are really socially isolated. They don't talk to anyone else, and they're all very intertwined within themselves and the teacher. And what happens is that, I'm just going to change this thing here. What happens is that whilst they're learning with this teacher, they come across this concept in Greek mythology of this divine madness. And they become really captivated by this idea and sort of go to try and find out what that was like. And that sort of starts a whole path, a whole series of events that eventually leads up to the murder of their friend. And the most interesting thing about this book, and what really captivated me, was this one character called Henry. And he's one of the 5. And he comes across as this really powerful, sort of stoic figure. But he's also really genuine and really compassionate and really generous. But by the end of the book, you sort of start to realize that he is a lot more than he seems, and you never really can pin down his character. And by the end of the book, you realize that you could potentially trace the entire series of seemingly disconnected and random events, including the murder of their friend, to Henry and his manipulation of everyone involved. And you don't know at the end if he's actually the villain of this whole story, or if he's a victim. And it's really interesting, and he's definitely the most interesting character that I've read this year, or potentially for a long time. I definitely recommend this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved it. You should read it too. Really interesting. The second book I read for this month was The Rest of Us Just Live Here, which is this little book. It's a really cute young adult novel. It's fantasy. It's this really great concept. Each chapter begins with a little paragraph like that. And it's actually, and this paragraph is a story within this book of your sort of stereotypical YA hero story, and you have the chosen one, and the backstabbings, and the love triangles, and fate and destiny, and the choices we make, and all those sort of concepts, and they're all in the first little paragraph at the beginning of each chapter. But what this story is about, it's called The Rest of Us Just Live Here, and it's about some of the kids, a group of friends that go to the college that they've chosen one to go to, and they just want to graduate. Think of it as the people who live in the city that Spider-Man lives with and has to deal with all the collateral damage that he causes. So all of their lives are impacted by this hero story that's going on in the background as opposed to the foreground of the story. And they just want to graduate. The actual story is your stereotypical YA coming-of-age story. It wasn't that great. It was pretty by the book, as it were. So I thought the concept was great. The actual story, not so amazing. But if you're looking for a short YA novel that's pretty light and amusing, go to this one. I'm not usually a big fan of Patrick Ness, and this book again didn't capture me. I read quite a few of his other ones. I read the first two of his Chaos Walking trilogy. I didn't finish it. I also read More Than This, which is his other book. Didn't get it. Really weird. Spends the first 100 or 200 pages with this one character, not meeting any other characters, and just walking around this town by himself. But that's the book that I read another time. Anyway, this one was cute. I recommend it if you're looking for something short to read. The next book I read was actually non-fiction, which is unusual for me. It's called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty by Ariely. It's a interesting, really accessible, scientific, psychology book about why we lie and the rationale behind our dishonesty and how that can be manipulated in certain ways. Really interesting. It's by Ariely, who's Israeli, and he has a couple of anecdotes that make it really interesting to read as well. So if you're interested in this topic, I recommend you pick it up. The next book I read was this wonderful gem called My Brilliant Friend, and I was recommended this book by my own brilliant friend, Ella Perlo, so shout out to you. It's by Elena Ferrante. It's the first of the Neapolitan novels, which are 4 in the series. They're all set in Naples, in Napoli, which is a city in southern Italy that I've actually visited. So it was quite interesting to read a story that could have taken place there a couple of decades ago. It's about Elena, funnily enough, the same name as the author, which is a pen name, and no one actually knows who this person is who wrote these novels, even though they're best-selling. It's about a girl called Elena and her relationship with Lila, who's another girl in the neighborhood that she grows up in. And they're very intense, competitive, jealous, strange power dynamic that's between them, and the way that their friendship impacts the course of their life and the choices they make. Lila, who is our protagonist's best friend, is a brilliant girl, a genius. She's well above her peers in all of her subjects at school. But she is the daughter of a shoemaker who does not believe in her getting an education. So she is taken out of school by her father to work in a shoe factory. And Elena, who idolizes Lila, adopts her dreams and instead goes on to become the brilliant one at school. And she keeps idolizing Lila and taking on and adopting her dreams as her own. And you see that from our perspective, it's a very one-sided relationship, but you get the feeling that Lila also does idolize Elena and value her in a really special way, but you can't see that because you're only seeing her through the eyes of Elena. You only see this one direction of the relationship. It's a really interesting look at the way that the neighborhood works as well, because they all are very insular and everyone knows each other's business, everyone knows everyone's kids, and the only people that you know are the people in your neighborhood. And it's about growing up like that. Really interesting. It's a very raw look at female adolescence, which is kind of awkward to read at some parts because it's so relatable. And you read these awkward things and you're like, oh, that's awkward. I remember doing that. But it's also really lovely for that reason. I definitely recommend picking this up. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest of them. The next book I read was, the last one I read for the July was this one. on the Jellico Road by Melina Marchetta, who is an incredible author, and really one of the most best classic authors of YA for this generation. She's right up there with John Marston, I reckon. This was actually a reread. I read it 10 years ago for the first time, and all I remember from that point was a couple of really minor details and the fact that when I finished this book, I said, that's my favourite book, or one of my favourite books, and I even named my dog after one of the characters. So I thought it was time for a reread. This is the story of Taylor, and who is a girl who goes to the Jellico school, and she is the head of her house, and even amongst the leaders of the house at the school, she is the head of the leaders, which means that she has to participate in the territory wars, which are wars for the territory around the Jellico school between the Jellico school kids, the townies, who are the kids who live in the town, and the cadets, who come from a school a while away and come at camp and train near their school for 6 weeks. But it's also a story about Taylor trying to find out about her past, because you realise that she doesn't know her father, and her mother abandoned her when she was about 11 years old. And she abandoned her in a 7-Eleven, and she was picked up by a woman called Hannah, who lives on the school grounds. And the story starts because Hannah goes missing, and Taylor finds a manuscript in her house. And Taylor starts reading this manuscript, and it's about 5 friends. And as she continues reading the manuscript, which is spaced throughout this book, you start to realise that Hannah is actually the key to Taylor's past, even though she's never told her, and that the manuscript is about 5 friends who actually lived in Jellico, and Hannah starts to piece together the story of where she came from through this manuscript and through the events that are taking place in the town today. It's a really incredible story about the bonds of love and friendship and family. It's a little bit tragic as well. I finished crying, but it's incredible. It's really poignant. I loved it, and I definitely recommend you pick it up. It's really easy to read and really beautiful, so I love it very much. And that brings us to the end of July books. I hope you like this video. I will figure out how to edit these things soon enough. Until then, let me know if you've read any of the books that I have mentioned today and what you thought of them. And feel free to give me some recommendations as well, because I'm always on the lookout for them. Alright, see you later.